Hello everyone, Stephen Schmitter here, Recreation Supervisor of Fitness with the City of Wilmington, bringing you a presentation today called Mindfulness in Uncertain Times. As I'm sure you're all aware, we are certainly in uncertain times. We've all dealt with a range of situations over these past few months, mostly dealing with the pandemic. That can definitely cause some higher anxiety and stress levels in our lives, whether it's kids being home from school, different work arrangements, working from home, going to work under new protocols, even going to the grocery store was stressful at one time and still may be for some. Not being able to see family, friends, it's been a lot going on. So having a tool like mindfulness to help you navigate situations like this can definitely be helpful, and I'm happy to bring these tools to you and teach you a little bit about mindfulness today if you are not currently experienced with mindfulness. So let's get into it. Do you ever feel overwhelmed, anxious, stressed, distracted, have trouble getting to sleep because your mind is racing, react negatively and then regret it, whether it's to a person or something you read or see? As we already talked about a little bit, anxiety and stress might be high right now, but you certainly could be experiencing some of these other things, and maybe it didn't even take a pandemic for you to feel all these things in your life. The good news is there is a way to mitigate these symptoms, if you will, and we're going to work on that today. So imagine feeling a sense of peace and calm more often, feeling confident about the future instead of uncertain, feeling less stressed, improving your ability to fight off illness, falling asleep quickly and with a quiet mind, and being less reactive. This is essentially the opposite of the things listed on the previous slide. And these are all benefits that have been studied that can come from a regular mindfulness practice. So this is what you have to potentially look forward to if you can simply instill a few of these techniques that we're going to talk about today. Now a quote from former monk Dandapani. If you are allowing distraction to control you or purposely seeking distraction during your waking hours, you are practicing distraction for something like 12 to 16 hours per day. Distraction is the opposite of attention. What if you practiced piano for 12 to 16 hours per day? You would be a master. Most people are masters of distraction. So his punchline here tells us that most of us, myself included, are masters of distraction. This is because when you feel uncomfortable, when you have negative emotions, things like anxiety or worry, as we talked about, many of us having right now, a typical reaction is to reach for something to distract you. We also have habits and things that put us on autopilot throughout the day, where we can essentially be distracted and not paying close attention to what we're doing or what's going on inside our mind or our body. So in order to achieve a state of mindfulness, we're going to have to learn how to cultivate our attention. So I'm going to teach you that in just a second on another slide. But first, let's look at a metaphor. So here's our metaphor. This is you inside the waterfall of your thoughts. I'm sure most of you can relate to this feeling of so many thoughts and sensations and things coming at you throughout the day. It can be a bit overwhelming. Another phrase that we often use is being lost in thought. That's when a lot of these things like anxiety can pop up, when you start to worry about the future or ruminate on the past, thinking of past things that have happened to you or that you've done. It's when you think about, oh, I should have done this, should have done that, could have done that better. All these thoughts are flowing through you, and they're distracting you from the moment, from where you're at currently in the day and what you may rather be focusing on. So we're going to return to this throughout the day. Okay, so before we get into the mindfulness training, it is important to learn how to concentrate or focus. You're going to need some skill with being able to focus or concentrate for periods of time in order to practice mindfulness properly. Just getting good at this concentration or focus is not necessarily itself mindfulness, but it is going to be a necessary tool in our toolbox, so to speak. So it's pretty simple. You deliberately focus on something such as the breath, sounds, sensations in your body, thoughts, etc. Of course, you just choose one of these things. That is essentially the definition of concentrating or focusing, finding one thing to focus on. And then when the mind begins to wander, which it will, you want to gently bring it back to your object of concentration. And many people say that this is essentially the reps of concentration training. So if you think in terms of fitness, you have to get your reps in, right? You have to do your reps of bench press or your squats in order to improve. The mind wandering and then bringing it back when you're trying to focus or concentrate is how you get better at focusing or concentrating. You're not just going to instantly be able to hold your focus or hold your concentration for extended periods of time, but how you get better is by bringing it back, noticing it, and then bringing it back as it wanders. So consider when you notice yourself, let's say you're trying to focus on your breath. When you notice your mind wander to your thoughts or wander to a sound you hear, you don't want to get upset. You don't want to say, oh, gosh, I made a mistake. You just want to say, I'm thinking, or I just heard a sound. Let me come back to my breath, which is what I was intending to focus on. And this is really going to help you to improve that concentration and that focus over time. Now back to our metaphor. There you are, still in the water. Waterfall still coming down of thoughts trying to overwhelm you. But now you have a tool. And that tool is, in this case, an umbrella. But the umbrella represents concentration, focus, or attention. I'm using those words interchangeably. And that is what you just learned how to train. So once you have that ability to focus or pay attention for longer periods of time, that's the same as bringing your umbrella to the waterfall to kind of hold off those other thoughts and sensations, the things that you don't necessarily want to pay attention to. Now we get into our actual mindfulness training. We're going to talk about 2 stages. And in stage 1, you have a 1A and a 1B. All of these forms of mindfulness that we're going to talk about here are things that you may have already experienced on your own without even knowing what they are. And you can experience any of them at any time. So you don't necessarily have to go in order, but in terms of the actual practice, I do recommend starting with 1A if you're being deliberate about your mindfulness practice. But you can experience 1B or stage 2 at any time as well. And you might understand that, or you might even realize that you have experienced them before as I kind of described them a little bit more. But let's start with 1A. So this is where you deliberately notice what your attention is on, even if it's bouncing around between thoughts, sensations, sights, sounds, etc. So remember, with attention, we picked something to focus on. With mindfulness, we're just paying attention to these different things. Where is our attention going? It's almost like a third party. It's almost like you're stepping outside yourself and noticing what you're paying attention to. And a key, the last part of the sentence there, is without judgment of what you notice. So it's very important that even if you're observing your thoughts at the time and you're having negative thoughts, positive thoughts, that you don't label those thoughts as negative or positive. You don't judge them. You don't judge your sensations. If you're experiencing some pain or an itch or something like that, it's not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. You just are experiencing that. And I have a quick little story that I think really brings home the point of why we would not want to judge these things, not only when we're trying to train our mindfulness, but possibly just in everyday life as well. So let's do this story. There was an old farmer who had one horse for his land. One day his horse runs away, and his neighbor comes over and says to commiserate, "I'm so sorry about your horse." And the farmer says, "We'll see." The neighbor is confused because this is clearly terrible. The horse is the most valuable thing he owns. But the horse comes back the next day, and he brings with him 3 feral horses. The neighbor comes back over to celebrate. "Congratulations on your great fortune." And the farmer replies again, "We'll see." And the next day the farmer's son is taming one of the wild horses, and he's thrown and breaks his leg. The neighbor comes back over. "I'm so sorry about your son." But the farmer repeats, "We'll see." Sure enough, the next day the army comes through their village and is conscripting able-bodied young men to go and fight in a war. But the son is spared because of his broken leg. Again the neighbor comes over to offer a congratulations on the man's good fortune. Again the farmer exclaims, "We'll see." So as you can see there, that's an old Japanese fable that I heard a while ago, and I immediately saw the value in it. It's a great little fable of how we never really know. Whatever we experience at any given moment, any event that happens to us, anything in our lives, we rush to attribute something to it, whether we think it's a great thing or a bad thing, and as the chain of events go, you never really know. And that's a great story to remind you of that, which also, again, goes back to just not judging things as they come up, whether it's thoughts, sensations, sights, sounds, not being attached to those things as you're practicing your mindfulness. Now 1B, moving on, is just a spontaneous noticing of what your attention is on. So 1A is deliberately sitting down to have your mindfulness practice. Maybe you're closing your eyes, and again, just sitting and paying attention to what arises. 1B is just throughout the day. You may be walking, you may be riding in the car, you may be in the middle of working, and all of a sudden you have this moment of clarity, essentially, where you really notice, oh, what's going on, or you're really noticing your thoughts coming through, or again, specific sensations. It's again almost like you stepped outside yourself to notice these things. So you can see where 1B is something that you may have experienced before. One thing I have noticed is that the more I train my meditation, the longer I've had my practice going, the more of these spontaneous moments I have throughout the day, the deeper that they can be, and the more beneficial, essentially, the more appreciative of them I am. So that is stage 1 mindfulness. Moving on. Back to our metaphor here. I explained it a little bit in previous slides, that feeling of feeling removed now as you experience mindfulness. So this is the picture version of that. So instead of our you being inside the waterfall with the thoughts flowing over you, now you are outside the waterfall. You can still see the thoughts, the sensations, the feelings, all of those things, but you don't feel overwhelmed by them. You don't feel like you're trapped in the midst of them. You feel like, again, somehow you're slightly removed and outside of. So now let's go on to stage 2 mindfulness. So stage 2 mindfulness. This is when you catch a glimpse of what it's like to no longer identify with your thoughts, feelings, sensations, etc. Sometimes this is called ego dissolution or no self in different practices. It's essentially when you are no longer there. Normally, everything we do, we think of in terms of I or me. This is happening to me. I am doing this. But when you have this experience, there's no I, there's no me for the experience to happen too. You just notice that there is a thought, there is a sensation. It's not necessarily I am having this thought or I am feeling this sensation. It's just that those things are there. If you're having trouble grasping this, think of it in terms of watching a movie. When you really get lost in a movie, you're not in the movie. You don't look at the characters or look at the things that are happening and have to think, oh, how is this affecting me, right? You think in terms of how it's affecting the characters. We can get emotionally involved in a movie, but we don't think in terms of ourselves for a little while, up to 2 hours. If you're completely engrossed in a movie, you, as you normally are, don't really exist. Just the movie is there. So this is what you can catch a glimpse of without watching something like a movie when you are experiencing mindfulness. And the interesting thing is that during a movie, you're distracted, so you may not notice it. But when you're experiencing it through mindfulness, you're noticing it, you're experiencing it. It's just not you at the time that's noticing or experiencing it. The cool thing is you don't have to have a formal meditation practice or even any experience meditating to have this experience. It's also not really a skill. It's just something that's there. It can always be seen. You can always catch a glimpse of it. Again, as I'm explaining this, some of you may be going, oh, yeah, I've definitely felt that before. Had no idea what it was, just knew it was something. It often feels quite profound because it is a rare moment where we're not lost in our own thoughts or lost in how things are affecting us or being self-critical or placing judgment on ourselves. We're not currently grasping for things. We're not wanting something at the time. We're not pushing away from something or trying to get away from something, which is how most of our day goes, right? So this is a rare glimpse, a rare moment of complete, essentially, peace from mind. Here we are at the last stage of our metaphor. Thoughts and sensations still coming down as the waterfall. This time, no person. This is to symbolize the idea that you are no longer the one experiencing these things. There is an experience of thoughts and sensations. They are there. There's a noticing of them. It's just that you are no longer relating them to your own identity, to your own self. Again, not everyone is going to experience this. Some of you may have already experienced this, but if you do, it can be quite insightful, quite useful in giving you that brief moment of, again, not being attached to anything, not feeling so beholden to your identity to where you run everything through that lens of how does this affect me? What does this mean to me? It can be a nice little moment of peace from all that. One of the beautiful things about meditation is that it's all practice. There's no game, no performance, no one telling you that you're doing it right or wrong, because really there is no right or wrong. It's something that you can just do. You simply sit down and pay attention. If you're really unsure of where to start, I would suggest just doing 1 minute. Pay as close attention to your breath as you can. So a lot of times it's recommended to just feel where you feel the breath the most. Maybe it's in your nose, maybe it's in your belly, and just really try to pay attention to the in and the out of the breath in that area. And again, just start with 1 minute, work your way up in time. This is really essentially that focus or attention training. You get better at that, and then you can go to the stage 1 mindfulness training that we talked about. You can also use a guided meditation app, such as Headspace, Calm, or Waking Up, which is my app of choice. All of these are paid eventually, but they do have free introductory courses that can really give you a chance to experience what it's like to meditate, what it's like to have someone kind of guide you through it, which can be helpful. Some people like the guided, some people prefer to just do it on their own. It doesn't hurt to try it one way or the other. If you're really an overachiever, you can try simply sitting with no intention other than to pay attention to whatever arises for 1 hour. I have not actually done this myself. I do occasionally do a 30 or 45-minute session, but I have not done an hour session. But I do hear that they can be quite helpful, especially if it's where you start. There is a challenge on the internet by a guy named Naval Ravikant where you do this 1 hour for 60 days straight, and the people that have come out on the other end of that have said that it was an extremely profound experience, and they really learned a lot and got a lot out of it. But again, it's obviously understandable why not a lot of us may have the time to sit down for an hour by ourselves with no distractions and be able to do that. That's completely understandable today. But either way, whether you're starting off with just the 1 minute or you're going for the gold, so to speak, with the overachiever, everything counts. And again, even if you do the 1 hour, someone might do the 1 hour, someone might do the 1 minute, and you might get the exact same thing out of it. That's the thing about meditation and mindfulness, is you never know what your mind is going to be like, how you're going to experience these things. You can get great benefits from short amounts of time, from short insights. So that is part of the beauty of meditation practice and mindfulness. Another short story real quick. A student went to his meditation teacher and said, "My meditation is horrible. I feel so distracted, or my legs ache, or I'm constantly falling asleep. It's just horrible." "It will pass," the teacher said matter-of-factly. A week later, the student came back to his teacher. "My meditation is wonderful. I feel so aware, so peaceful, so alive. It's just wonderful." "It will pass," the teacher replied matter-of-factly. So as you can see here in this story, the teacher is not judging the student in any way. The teacher is not telling them that they're doing something right or something wrong. The student is having two very different experiences of their meditation, but what the teacher is reminding them is simply that each experience is going to be different. Each time you meditate, you can have a totally different experience. Everything changes, everything moves on. It will all pass, essentially, is what the teacher is reminding them. So it's important in meditation and life in general, to not grasp on or not try to hold on to things, or really to strive for anything specific within meditation. Again, the practice is simply just paying attention to whatever arises. And that includes, in this case, for the student, paying attention to their reaction to the meditation. And again, realizing that each experience is different, and each experience will pass on, and they will no doubt have many, many meditations ahead of them and a range of different insights from that meditation. I'd like to share with you now a little bit about how I've navigated the uncertainty of these past few months. Not because I feel like I have all the right answers or that I want you to do exactly what I'm doing, but because I feel like if I'm going to be putting on a presentation like this, I should show you exactly the practices that I'm doing, so you know that they can be done by a real person. Sometimes people put on presentations and things and they simply spout off, "This is what the latest research says you should do," or "This is what this textbook says you should do," or "In theory, this would be the best thing to do," but it's not always practical for real life. So I'd like to share with you some things that I've been able to do that have worked for me. Do you have to do all these things? By no means. All of us are in a different place. All of us have different abilities to do some of this stuff. But again, I'd just like to share with you the practices that I feel like have been helpful to me during these times. So, of course, I have my daily meditation practice and mindfulness training. This has been a cornerstone throughout. I had to move it around a little bit here and there. I've had to be adaptable with it as some of the days obviously don't all look the same. Daily exercise also has had to move around at times, but I've made sure to keep a good schedule there. We know that the mind and the body work closely together, so when you're treating your body well with good exercise, it definitely has positive effects on your mind, on those stress levels and levels of anxiety. Having those moments of mindfulness throughout the day, like we talked about, that's that 1B in the stage 1 mindfulness. Again, I've noticed that the longer I have my meditation practice, my regular practice, the more of these moments I tend to have throughout the day, the more readily available they seem to be, and the more beneficial they are. Spending time outdoors, this is something that's also backed by research, but I have experienced myself. I can definitely tell a difference on the days where, I'm able to get outside in the sunlight and experience a little bit of nature. We have some nature trails near the house, which is really nice. So, just spending some time outside, I definitely notice a difference on the days I can do that versus the days I do not get to. Having family routines, obviously everyone's daily routines got thrown about a bit during the quarantine, but one thing that we've been really able to keep, I think, as a staple throughout is sitting down for family dinner. It's been great. Helps keep us grounded as a family, I think. Again, in all the uncertainty, it's nice to know that you have that one thing for sure that you can look forward to being consistent each day. Being mindful of when my mind is trying too hard to predict the future. Sometimes I can get, when I get lost in thought, as we all do, I can get a little bit too future focused, and in these times where things are so uncertain, that becomes extremely difficult. It's hard to predict the future when you have no idea what's going to happen next, as I'm sure you've all experienced throughout this. So the best thing is to notice when I'm trying to do this, when I'm kind of stuck in this anxiety producing mode, so to speak, and gently pull myself out of it using mindfulness and bringing myself back to the moment, to the here, the now, where I can actually pay attention to what's going on and have a little bit of control over what's going on. So those are my practices. Again, you don't have to do all those things. You don't have to do any of those things if you don't want to, but I just thought I would share that I do feel like those things have really helped me during these uncertain times, and I surely intend to continue to do them as we move forward here and as things continue to change and either go back to somewhat normal or continue to be uncertain. I really appreciate you guys for taking the time to check out this presentation today. It's my pleasure to share this information with you. I really am a big fan of mindfulness, and again can speak from experience of how it can be of a positive impact and a positive influence on your life and on your mental state. So hopefully you give it a try, and again, thank you.